Nothing ever did around here. Dover wasn't the kind of place you expected children to vanish. With just under 12,000 people, it was the kind of town where news still traveled by word of mouth, where the local diner kept a chalkboard for birthdays, and where kids rode their bikes in barefoot circles until dinner was called. People here didn't lose each other, they grew old together. Warren McGraw, Sharon's boyfriend of just over a year, was in the house too, supposedly fixing the screen door. According to him, Lily had been humming something into the recorder around 1:30 p.m., singing softly to herself, barefoot on the grass, and then silence. When Sharon awoke just before 3 p.m., the front yard was empty. Lily's chalk drawings still covered the walkway. Her juice box sat upright by the porch steps. But the toy recorder and Lily were both gone. At first, there was no panic. Sharon walked up and down the block calling Lily's name. Maybe she'd wandered off to the neighbor's house. Maybe she'd chased a butterfly or run after the mailman's dog. It wasn't until a full 30 minutes had passed and none of the neighbors had seen her that the fear began to set in. By 3:40 p.m., Sharon had called the police. Within the hour, Dover PD had issued an alert and officers were canvassing the surrounding streets. That night, a local news crew captured footage of officers and volunteers combing through nearby woods with flashlights and dogs. Lily's photo, bright-eyed, with a gap in her front teeth, was printed across every telephone pole in town. Sharon, still in her scrubs, stood trembling in front of the house she no longer recognized. "She was just here," she whispered to the cameras. "She was right here." NIT. What followed over the next 48 hours was the largest search Dover had seen in over 2 decades. Over 100 volunteers, bloodhounds, helicopters, dive teams in the nearby Tuscarawas River. Nothing. No footprints, no fibers, no witnesses. Not even the toy recorder. It was as if the air itself had swallowed Lily whole. Rumors started within days. Some whispered about strangers passing through town. A man in a white truck. A drifter seen loitering behind the gas station. But others looked inward, to the house, to the man who wasn't Lily's father. Warren McGraw's behavior quickly drew scrutiny. While Sharon sobbed openly in interviews, Warren stood stiffly beside her, arms crossed, saying little. He gave inconsistent accounts of his whereabouts that afternoon. At first, he said he was fixing the screen door. Later, he claimed he was watching television and didn't hear anything unusual. He allowed police to search the house, but refused to take a polygraph. "I've done nothing wrong," he told them, "and those things aren't reliable anyway." There was no evidence against him, no sign of forced entry, no blood, no hair, no fibers, no signs of a struggle, just an empty yard and a vanished child. Sharon defended him at first. He loved her, she told detectives. He built her that swing set. But over time, even she began to question what she hadn't seen. Lily's biological father, Lily Harper, drove in from Michigan the next morning. The divorce had been bitter, and Lily had only visited him twice since Sharon moved to Dover. Derek didn't trust Warren. Never had. And now, with his daughter gone, he demanded answers. "Someone knows something," he told reporters, eyes red with exhaustion. "You don't just lose a little girl like that, not in the middle of a sunny afternoon." But the days turned into weeks, and the story slipped slowly from the front page. In a town like Dover, the news cycle had a short memory. People began locking their doors. Children weren't allowed to play outside without supervision. Sharon quit her job at the hospital. The once colorful chalk drawings on the sidewalk washed away in the July rain. And life, as it always does, moved forward, just without Lily. Nobody was ever found. No confession, no breakthrough. By the fall of 1991, the case went cold. Officially, she was listed as missing and presumed abducted. Unofficially, people moved on, except for one person. Sharon Harper never stopped searching. In between shifts at a local pharmacy, she drove up and down the highways, placing flyers in truck stops, rest areas, motel lobbies. She joined forums, mailed letters to television stations, wrote to psychics, even hired a private investigator who drained her savings. Every box, every basement, every tip empty. She kept Lily's room the same. The yellow curtains, the stuffed animals on the bed. And when she moved back in with her mother in 1998, she packed everything into boxes, every sock, every crayon, every toy, including one she hadn't seen since that day. It was almost a decade before the box was opened again. A gray plastic bin labeled Lily's Things in fading black Sharpie, sealed with duct tape, tucked away in the back corner of Sharon Harper's mother's attic. The summer heat up there was unbearable, but Sharon didn't care. She was looking for something, anything, to fill the silence that had grown around her daughter's memory. It was July of the year 2000. Sharon had just finalized her second divorce and was staying in her childhood home in Dover while she figured out what to do next. The old house creaked in the same places it used to. The windows stuck the same way they always had, and every morning Sharon woke up at 4:11 a.m., the exact time the phone rang 9 years ago to tell her the search dogs had come up empty. She hadn't gone through Lily's things in years, not properly. Some of it had been packed quickly, emotionally, without thought, just stuffed into bins as if storing grief in airtight containers could keep it from spreading. The box she opened that afternoon contained mismatched socks, folded over coloring books, hair ties still twisted with strands of fine blonde hair, and at the very bottom, a toy Sharon hadn't seen since the 21st of June, 1991. It was the recorder. Orange plastic rounded edges, 2 cartoonish eyes on the front. The Playschool talkback recorder had been Lily's favorite. You could press one button to record a voice and another to play it back. Most of the time, it was just silly stuff, Lily humming songs, mimicking the cat, reading from her picture books with dramatic flair. It had never worked well. Sometimes the playback was warped. Sometimes it repeated unprompted. But it had made her laugh, and that had been enough. Sharon held it like it might crumble in her hands. It was dirty. One of the battery panel screws rusted, and the speaker was lined with attic dust. But when she pressed the oversized red play button, it clicked. And word. And then it spoke. It wasn't Lily's voice. It was a man's voice. Deep, quiet, close to the microphone. Sharon felt her stomach drop. "Lily, just get in the truck." Then silence. She pressed play again. "Lily, just get in the truck." It was 6 seconds long. No more, no less, static on either end, but clear, too clear. She played it 10 more times before she stood up, recorder in hand, and walked downstairs without saying a word to her mother. She drove straight to the Dover Police Department. The officer on duty, a young man who hadn't even been in high school when Lily vanished, looked confused as Sharon explained. He called for someone from the cold case desk. That someone was Detective Maya Liddell. Maya was new to the department. Mid-30s, former Baltimore PD, moved to Dover the year before after a string of burnout cases and a bitter custody battle of her own. She was sharp, skeptical, and known for not being afraid to challenge procedure. But she'd also read the Lily Harper file. She remembered the headlines. And she knew cold cases rarely reignite on their own unless something or someone forced them to. She met Sharon in the lobby. Sharon didn't say much. She just held out the recorder and said, "Press play." Maya did. Once. Twice. She motioned for the evidence tech on duty to join them and asked for an evidence bag, a clean room, and a digital capture unit. Within the hour, the recorder had been scanned, photographed, and plugged into an audio interface. The file was old, degraded, but intact. They ran the audio through a spectrogram. Normal background static, faint wind, a high-pitched noise, possibly cicadas. But most important, a voice. "Lily, just get in the truck." Priestley. Sharon sat frozen in the corner of the room, eyes unfocused. "It's him," she whispered. "It's Warren." The statement hung in the air like a confession no one had wanted to make for 9 years. Maya didn't say anything at first. She just turned to the tech and asked one question. "Can we compare it?" What followed was a week of slow, methodical analysis. The department pulled every VHS tape and home recording Sharon had from her time with Warren McGraw. Birthday parties, Christmas morning, a barbecue in the backyard, anything where his voice might have been captured even in passing. The tapes were old, grainy, but on one of them, a camcorder clip from December 1990, there was a moment. Warren, helping Lily unwrap a gift, leaned over and said, "Just get in there and see what Santa brought you." Same cadence, same vocal tone, same breathy delivery. Sharon covered her mouth as it played. Maya had it isolated and laid over the toy recorder sample, waveforms side by side. A voice recognition specialist from Cleveland State University was brought in. Preliminary comparison. 86% probability of a match. With clearer source audio, that number could climb. It wasn't a smoking gun. Not yet. But it was enough to reopen the case. Warren McGraw hadn't lived in Dover for years. After Sharon left him in '94, he'd bounced around the state Zanesville, then Chillicothe, eventually landing outside of Dayton. He'd changed his name legally in 1998 after a bankruptcy filing. He was now going by Martin Greaves. Single. No kids. Worked as a mechanic at a tire shop. When Maya called his workplace posing as a former friend, he picked up. And the moment he said hello, she knew. Same voice, same softness. The voice you use with children when you want them to obey. She didn't arrest him. Not yet. There wasn't enough. But she notified the state, flagged his alias, and initiated quiet surveillance. He hadn't run. He hadn't changed his behavior. Maybe he thought he was safe. Maybe he had been until now. Maya went back to Sharon a week later with a question. Did Warren ever drive a truck? Sharon blinked. He had an old red pickup when we first met. Rusted, out tailgate, used to park it behind the garage. Why? Because someone said, "Get in the truck." Not car. Not van. Truck. We may have a location. Maya pulled up historical maps of the area behind Sharon's old house. There was a gravel service road that led to a construction site at the edge of town back in 1991. It had been sealed off since 1994, overgrown now. But back then, it was open. 3 days later, cadaver dogs were brought in. And that was when they found something. The gravel road had been forgotten. Overgrown with weeds, hemmed in by saplings and brush, the path behind the old Harper house looked more like a deer trail than something once used by construction crews. But in the early summer of 1991, it had been active. Cement trucks, bulldozers, backhoes, they came and went daily, cutting into the earth for what was supposed to be a housing development that never materialized. By 1994, the company behind it had filed bankruptcy. The land was sold back to the township and slowly swallowed by time. When Maya Liddell walked that stretch with the K-9 unit, something changed in the air. The dog, an old bloodhound named Roscoe, stiffened at a point near the tree line, where a rusted aluminum can mark the entrance to a small clearing. The grass was darker there. The soil turned up differently when disturbed. The handler nodded without speaking. They marked the area and brought in ground-penetrating radar the next day. It didn't take long. Less than 2 feet beneath the surface, buried under layers of loose fill and organic rot, was a small hollowed depression with warped wood fragments and shreds of cloth. There were no remains, not the kind you'd expect anyway, no bones, no full skeleton. But they did find one thing, a shoe. It was tiny. Size 11 in toddler sizing, faded pink canvas. The sole nearly dissolved. Inside, matted against the heel, were several strands of fine blonde hair. The lab confirmed it within the week. Mitochondrial DNA match. Lily Harper. For the first time in 9 years, there was physical evidence. Sharon was called into the station on a Tuesday morning. She sat in silence as Maya placed the shoe in a sealed bag on the table. Her hand trembled as she reached out, stopped herself, then pulled her fingers back into her lap. She didn't cry, her voice didn't shake, she just said one thing. She wore those to the fair. Oh, Warren, now Martin Greaves, was arrested the next morning at his apartment in Dayton. He didn't resist. He didn't ask why. He didn't say a word. Just stood still in the hallway in his oil-stained work shirt, holding a can of beer he'd barely opened, and blinked twice. The news broke within hours. Arrest made in 1991 disappearance of Dover girl. The press camped outside Sharon's home for days. Talk shows picked it up. Cold case podcasts released specials. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why now? Why after all these years? The answer was simple, and it came in the form of a toy no one thought to keep. The recorder became the centerpiece of the state's case. Prosecutors argued that the 6-second audio clip wasn't just a recording, it was a dying echo, a frozen frame of time preserved inside plastic. The voice saying, "Just get in the truck," carried context, implication, intent. The tone was firm, direct, but not panicked. It sounded familiar. It sounded rehearsed. The defense tried to challenge the reliability of the device, suggesting it may have recorded at a different date, or worse, had been tampered with. But forensic analysis of the magnetic tape mechanism inside showed no signs of forced rewinding or overlay. The original battery corrosion patterns matched a continuous timeline of dormancy. The most damning evidence came not from the technology, but from Warren himself. During the preliminary hearing, investigators revealed he had once purchased an identical toy recorder in 1989 for his nephew, a fact confirmed by old credit card receipts and a witness who remembered the purchase. The prosecution used it to paint a chilling picture. Warren knew how the recorder worked. He knew it could be turned on, even accidentally. And yet, he left it behind. Maybe he didn't realize it had captured anything. Maybe he thought time would erase it. But he never expected someone would press play almost a decade later. There was another piece of evidence subtle, overlooked at first. In the background of the recording, just before the voice speaks, there's a faint double-click sound. Investigators brought in old footage of 1980s Chevy pickup trucks. The passenger side doors made that sound when they opened fully and then bounced slightly on the hinge before closing. It was specific, distinct, and matched the model Warren had owned at the time. When confronted with all of this, Warren still said nothing. Not during arraignment, not during questioning, not even to his public defender. He refused to speak a word about Lily Harper. Sharon attended every hearing. She never sat in the front row. Always 2 rows back, hands clasped, not looking at Warren. She wore the same silver locket each day, containing Lily's last school photo. She never gave a single interview. But Maya did. In a press conference weeks before the trial, she stood behind the podium, lifted the orange toy recorder for the cameras, and said, "This is what persistence looks like. This is what a mother's love sounds like. And this is how silence, even from a child, can eventually speak the truth." That line would be repeated on every news channel for the next week. It wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about how easy it is to forget the voices of the missing. How, sometimes, they come back when we least expect them. The trial was scheduled for November 2000. The courtroom was small, old-fashioned, with wooden benches and ceiling fans that never worked. Jury selection took longer than expected. Finding 12 people who hadn't heard the case in some form was nearly impossible in Dover. Eventually, they pulled from a neighboring county. Opening statements began on a Thursday morning, cold and overcast. The prosecution started by playing the recording, 6 seconds. That's all it took. The room went still. "Lily, just get in the truck." Some jurors flinched. One woman covered her mouth. Another blinked fast and looked away. The defense countered that there was no proof of a crime, no confession, no body, just a shoe, some hair, and a cheap recording toy known for playback errors. But the jury heard more than that. They heard how Sharon had stored that toy, unaware of what it contained. They heard how Warren had no alibi for the time of disappearance. They saw the map of the buried shoe site and the location of Warren's truck that day, recorded on an old payroll stub from a delivery route. And they heard the voice. Again. And again. 6 seconds. Over and over. Each time it played, the silence after it felt heavier. The trial stretched on for 12 days. And then, on the 13th day, the verdict came in. They didn't look at him when they read the verdict. None of the jurors did. One stared at the floor. Another blinked and wiped her eye. The foreman cleared his throat, unfolded the verdict sheet, and spoke in a voice that sounded far too soft for what it carried. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Warren Michael McGraw, guilty of first-degree murder." There was no sound in the courtroom, no gasp, no sob. Just stillness, like breath, had paused collectively. Warren didn't react. He didn't blink, flinch, or move. He just stared ahead, jaw slack, as if the moment had never arrived, as if 9 years of silence had not finally cracked open and swallowed him. Sharon Harper didn't cry. She sat 2 rows back, her hands folded in her lap, her locket cool against her collarbone. She hadn't spoken to the press once during the trial. She hadn't made eye contact with Warren. And even now, after hearing the words she'd waited nearly a decade to hear, she didn't look at him. She looked at the toy recorder. It sat sealed in an evidence bag, inside a locked box on a table near the bailiff. Quiet now, inert. But she knew what it had done. It had spoken when no one else would. And it had remembered what she'd forgotten. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. Life without parole. The judge called it the most disturbing and unexpected evidence the court had ever seen in a capital case. Warren never spoke. Not once. No apology. No explanation. Not even a denial. Just silence. But Maya Liddell wasn't satisfied. Because even after the conviction, even after the recording, the shoe, the trial, the verdict, there was still something missing. There was no body. And without a body, something remained open. Something didn't settle. Sharon knew it too. She felt it in her sleep, in the way she moved through her mother's house, in the way her fingers would rest on doorknobs just a second too long before turning. She hadn't buried her daughter. And until she did, nothing would truly be over. Maya filed a request to re-examine the original Harper house, which had changed hands 3 times since 1991. The current owners, a retired couple with no connection to the case, agreed on one condition. They didn't want to be there when it happened. The team arrived early, just after sunrise. Maya, 2 forensic investigators, and a structural engineer. The basement had been remodeled in the late 90s, but old blueprints showed a crawl space behind one wall that had never been accounted for. It wasn't large, maybe 4 feet deep, 6 feet across. No access door. Just sealed drywall and insulation. They opened it carefully. Behind the wall was a narrow cavity filled with loose debris insulation, brick dust, and something else. A wooden crate, weathered. Split along one side. Inside it was nothing human. No bone. No tissue. But there were pieces. A child's winter jacket. A broken hair clip. A necklace made from macaroni painted gold. And taped to the underside of the crate, almost as an afterthought, was a scrap of paper, folded, yellowed, brittle, written in block letters with a blue crayon. Lily was here. Maya froze. She photographed it, gloved her hands, and unfolded the note fully. The backside was blank. Forensics would later confirm the handwriting matched Lily's kindergarten worksheets. The paper itself came from a pad sold at a Dover grocery store that had closed in 1992. Whatever had happened to Lily, however it ended, she had been in that space. Long enough to write. Long enough to leave something behind. The crate was removed, its contents cataloged, and the room sealed again. The homeowners never moved back in. Sharon asked to see the note. She held it without gloves, tears finally spilling, not from sorrow but from something else. Recognition. She remembered the way Lily wrote, the way she always drew stars inside her letter O's. There was no O in that message, but Sharon could see the intent. Her daughter had tried to be found. And now, finally, she was. The district attorney's office held a final press briefing the following month, closing the case officially. The media attention faded. Reporters moved on. But Maya didn't. She kept the case file on her desk for months afterward, rereading her notes, listening to the recording again and again, as if waiting for it to say something new. It never did. The voice remained the same. The tone, the breath, the pause before the door. All the same. But what had always haunted her wasn't the voice. It was the timing. The toy had a recording memory of roughly 6 seconds. That was its limit. Nothing could be saved longer than that. The tape would loop, overwrite itself, decay. The chances that it had captured the exact phrase at the exact moment Lily was taken and survived 9 years in storage with original batteries intact were impossible. Unless someone had played it. Repeatedly. Unless the voice had been heard again and again before being forgotten. Sharon didn't remember hearing it after Lily vanished. She swore she never found the toy until that summer in 2000. But Maya wondered, could trauma erase sound? Could grief mute memory? Or maybe it had always been waiting. Maya took one final look at the toy before sealing it away for evidence storage. Her hand hovered over the play button. For just a second, but she didn't press it. Some things, she thought, had spoken enough. And in the quiet that followed, in the place where 6 seconds of tape had shattered years of silence, something finally settled. Lily's voice, though never heard, had echoed through every courtroom, every hallway, every second of that summer, without ever needing to say a word. The house had been empty for months before someone finally bought it. A young couple from Cincinnati. No kids, just looking for space and quiet. They knew the history, everyone did, but they didn't care. It was cheap. And besides, the past doesn't live in drywall. It doesn't creak through floorboards. It doesn't hum in the pipes. Except, sometimes it does. The new owners started noticing it the second week after moving in. Not sounds, exactly more like pauses. Places where sound should have been. The radio, cutting out in one room. The hallway light flickering, but only when someone walked past the door to the basement. A low vibration that felt like humming when the house was otherwise silent. They told themselves it was the wiring, or air pressure, or just their nerves. They didn't believe in hauntings, but something believed in them. One night, the woman was cleaning out the crawl space behind the stairs, a space Maya's team hadn't touched because it didn't show up on the blueprints. It wasn't large. Just a triangle of low wood beneath the staircase, packed with dust and loose insulation. She pulled out a stack of old boards and behind them found something wedged into the wall, a box. Small, wooden, padlocked. She brought it upstairs, wiped it down, and sat with it for nearly an hour before calling her husband. The lock had rusted shut, but he pried it loose with a screwdriver. Inside were photographs, black and white, faded, some Polaroids, others glossy 5x7s, all of them of children. Not Lily, not anyone the owners recognized. But each photo was marked with a name, a year, and a number. Some dated back to the 1970s. They called the police the next morning. Maya Liddell wasn't on duty anymore, but when she heard what had been found, she requested the evidence personally. There were 14 photographs in total. 9 boys, 5 girls, ages ranging from roughly 4 to 10. Only 3 of the names matched missing children databases. The rest were unknown, unlinked, unidentified. But in the bottom of the box, beneath the photos, was something else. A cassette tape. Standard. Blank label. No writing. They had to dig up an old tape deck from storage to play it. Maya sat alone in the evidence room when she pressed play. The tape was mostly static, then faint voices. Music, old commercials, maybe a radio left on in the background. Then silence, then a child's voice. She couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl, but it was soft, afraid, whispering. "I don't want to go in the truck again." Then a pause. Then a different voice, not Warren's, deeper, rougher. "No more talking. You know the rules." The rest of the tape was unintelligible, garbled. But Maya had heard enough. Warren McGraw was not the beginning. He may not have even been the end. When Maya pulled the list of Warren's known associates from the late 1980s and early 1990s, one name stood out: Donald Fry, a former co-worker at the machine shop. No criminal record. No red flags. But he had moved away shortly after Lily vanished, bought a trailer in West Virginia, lived alone. When local police visited his property, he didn't answer the door. They found him later that night dead from what looked like suicide. The note he left behind was brief, cryptic, and written in all capital letters. They don't stop screaming on tape. Inside his home were 7 more tapes, all blank labeled, all locked away in a drawer next to old photos and clippings of missing children. None of the voices matched Warren's play, but one sounded like Lily. Maya played that one last. It wasn't a full sentence, just a few words. "Please, tell my mom I'm okay." And then static. The lab couldn't confirm it was her. The pitch and tone matched, but the age was wrong. Too old. If it was her, she'd have been recorded after the date she vanished, which was impossible. Wasn't it? Maya didn't know what to believe anymore. The recorder had opened one door, but now there were others. Darker, deeper, some that led back decades. The trial had ended. The man had been sentenced. The case on paper was closed, but Lily's voice still echoed, and so did others. There was something bigger buried in Dover, and it wasn't just in the ground. It was in closets, in walls, in attic spaces and broken toys and forgotten boxes. It lived in silence, and it waited. There was a reason Lily's case had gone cold so quickly. Maya understood that now. It wasn't just the absence of evidence or the slow procedural errors, it was the story. The one people told themselves when the facts got too dark, too complicated. A little girl vanished from a quiet town. Everyone searched. Nothing was found. Life moved on. The ending, though tragic, was simple. But the truth was never simple, because the more Maya uncovered, the more it seemed Lily's disappearance hadn't been a standalone tragedy but part of a pattern, a thread woven through decades, camouflaged by coincidence and forgetfulness. A string of names, faces, dates, all just far enough apart that no one had ever tied them together. Until now. The box hidden beneath the Harper staircase had given her 14 names. Donald Fry's trailer had added 7 more. And now the evidence board in Maya's home office, because she no longer trusted the station to keep it safe, held photographs of 21 missing children, all of whom vanished between 1,975 and 1,992. Different counties. Different states. But one thing in common. Each child had been reported missing within 100 miles of where Warren McGraw was living at the time. Some were never classified as abductions. One was thought to have drowned. Another wandered off during a camping trip. A third vanished during a custody exchange. But there were patterns. Children between the ages of 5 and 9. All during warm months. All within proximity to industrial sites or roadside motels. And all cases that went cold in under 90 days. No one saw it back then. No reason to. The databases didn't talk to each other. The agencies didn't share notes. And Warren, or the men he knew, had moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to draw attention. Until Lily. She had been different. She had been the story that didn't go away. Because of Sharon. Because of the town. And because somehow she had left a voice behind. But now Maya wondered if Lily had left something else. A trail. A fracture in the pattern. She spent nights listening to the tapes recovered from Donald Fry's trailer. Not all were audible, some were degraded beyond repair. But one stood out. It began with static, then breathing. Then the sound of a child counting. 1, 2, 3. The voice was soft, male, young. Then the counting stopped. I don't want to play anymore. Then a man's voice, distorted and distant. You play when I say. Then silence. The recording lasted 17 seconds. There was no screaming, no struggle, just the slow, mechanical hum of the tape ending. Maya stared at the wall. She was no longer working under department sanction. Technically, she had stepped down from active duty after the Harper conviction. But no one had told her to stop, and she wasn't ready to stop, because the tapes hadn't stopped. She pulled records of every cold case involving a child under age 10 between 1,980 and 1,995 within a 3-state radius. Hundreds. Then filtered for missing persons with no confirmed sightings, no ransom, and no forensic leads. It narrowed to 42. She compared handwriting samples, audio fragments, even roadside diner receipts. One thing kept returning. Cassette tapes. Not in every case, but in enough. One family had received an anonymous package with a child's voice saying, I want to come home, followed by silence. The police dismissed it as a prank. Another had reported finding a tape recorder under their child's bed a week after she vanished. The batteries were dead. The tape was blank. The case file didn't mention it again. Maya created a map. pins, threads, dates, circles around construction sites, refineries, motels, and truck depots. At the center of 5 of them, Warren McGraw. But he was in prison now, serving life without parole. And still the echoes remained. Maya arranged a visit. She hadn't seen him since the sentencing. He'd aged quickly. Thinner, eyes sunken, hair gray at the edges. He walked into the visitation room in shackles, but sat with a strange calm, as if time had slowed inside him, as if he had nothing left to lose. She didn't waste time. "There are other children," she said. He didn't respond. She laid out a photo. "This is Casey Ellis. Went missing in 1988. You were living in Galleon at the time." Still nothing. Another photo. "Megan Trout, 1984, Akron." Then she played a tape. The voice counting. The breathing. Warren flinched. Just once. Barely. But Maya saw it. "I know you weren't alone," she said. "I think you recorded them. I think that's how you kept them quiet. Gave them something to listen to, or made them listen to themselves." He finally looked at her, and smiled. It was small, hollow. The kind of smile you give when someone finally says something you've been waiting to hear. Then he leaned forward, and in a voice barely audible, he whispered, "They were already quiet." That was all he said. The guards pulled him back. Maya left without speaking. That night she couldn't sleep. She sat in her apartment, surrounded by photographs, maps, tape decks, and silence. It wasn't over. Not even close. She had a name now. A lead. A network. A system that had operated under everyone's nose for nearly 2 decades. And Lily Harper, the girl who vanished with a toy, had broken it. One sound. One voice. One child who pressed record at the right moment. Maya didn't know how many others were still missing. How many voices had been erased, but she knew what she had to do. She pressed play, and began listening again. The package arrived on a Monday morning, postmarked from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. No return address, just Maya's name, handwritten in blocky, uneven letters on a yellowed envelope sealed with 2 strips of electrical tape. Inside was a cassette. Old, faded, no label, no case. Just the tape, wrapped in a single sheet of lined notebook paper. The writing was childlike looping letters, backward S, uneven spacing, and 5 words that made Maya sit down before she even finished reading. "She said you would listen." She stared at it for a long time. Maya had received tapes before evidence copies, anonymous tips, prank submissions from internet trolls trying to exploit Lily's story, but this one felt different. There was something raw about it. Something too strange to be staged. And that sentence, "She said you would listen," wasn't addressed to the public. It was addressed to her. She closed the blinds, locked her apartment door, and pulled out the same cassette player she had used to decode the Donald Fry tapes. She placed the cassette inside, clicked the lid shut, and pressed play. For the first 10 seconds, nothing. Then a click. The whir of tape shifting. And then breathing. Shallow, shaky, uneven. A child's breath. Then a voice. "My name is Lily Harper." Maya froze. The voice was older. 11, maybe 12. Still soft, but with the weight of someone who'd learned to speak quietly, carefully. The voice continued. "If someone is hearing this, I hope it's you. I don't know what year it is. I don't know if I'm still here, but I think I've been here a long time." Maya pressed pause. She backed the tape up 5 seconds, pressed play again. "My name is Lily Harper." Same cadence, same tone. New distortion, new doubt. She let the tape roll. "They say no one's coming. That no one ever does. But I don't believe that. I remembered your name, Maya. You came once before, right? I heard them say it. I think you were close. I think you almost found me." Maya's throat tightened. Her hands clenched into fists. The tape crackled. A pause. Then, "There are more. They don't talk anymore, but they're here." Another pause. "I don't think they want to hurt us. I think they just want us to stop making noise." And then, static. 15 seconds of it. Then the tape ended. Maya didn't move for a full minute. She didn't rewind, she didn't breathe. Her body had turned cold. The logic center of her brain, the detective, the analyst, was already writing theories. A cruel prank, AI-generated mimicry, an old tape re-recorded with Lily's name. But none of those explanations felt real, because she recognized the voice, not just from the original case, but from a moment no one else remembered. 9 years ago, at the Harper home, during the first search, Maya hadn't even joined the department then. She was still a rookie riding second car, but she'd been called in to help canvass the street. And at one point, passing near the tree line, she thought she heard something. A child's voice. She turned. Nothing. No movement. Just cicadas and breeze and the hum of distant engines. She never reported it. Never even wrote it down. But now, here it was, on tape. And with it, a new question. Was Lily ever gone? Maya replayed the message. Again. And again. There was no proof of the tape's origin. No voice match database could confirm it definitively. But there were details in the background clues. At the 28-second mark, a bird call. Unfamiliar. She recorded it separately, sent it to an ornithologist. The answer came back the next day. Wood thrush. Range, Midwest and Mid-Atlantic states. Migration, late spring through summer. At the 42-second mark, a soft chime. A melody. Repeated 3 times. Maya isolated the sound, enhanced it, and matched it to an audio file on a discontinued line of Play School music mobiles sold in the early 90s. The unit only played one melody, Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. It was the same mobile that had once hung above Lily's crib. No one else would have known that. Maya checked every missing persons report in Iowa from the last 5 years. One name caught her eye. Rachel Miner. Age, 10. Disappeared 14 months earlier. Last seen walking home from a church potluck. Unsolved. Maya drove to Cedar Rapids. The post office confirmed the envelope had been dropped into a street mailbox on 3rd Avenue. No cameras, no witnesses. She retraced the path Rachel would have walked. 4 blocks, past a row of shuttered businesses, an abandoned daycare, a condemned warehouse with no roof and shattered windows. Maya stopped at the gate. The chain link had been cut and rewired with zip ties. Inside, silence. She walked the perimeter. At the back of the building, near a rusted service stairwell, she saw it. A toy, half buried in leaves. Orange plastic. Scratched. Faded. Another recorder. She reached for it. The battery panel was missing. The buttons stuck. But when she shook it lightly, something inside rattled. Tape. She brought it back to her car. Slid it in. Pressed play. Static. Then laughter. Children's laughter. Then a whisper. I told you she'd come. Click. Maya sat frozen behind the wheel. Engine off. Recorder in hand. The sun dipped low behind the cornfields. Cicadas started to hum. And somewhere in the distance, maybe in a building long forgotten, maybe in a place no map could name, a voice once lost kept playing, waiting, whispering its way home. The ceremony was quiet. No cameras, no speeches. Just a wooden bench facing the river, a bronze plaque, and a cluster of daffodils someone had tied with a yellow ribbon. It had taken Sharon nearly a year to decide what to put on the marker. In the end, she chose only 6 words. Lily Harper loved, heard, never lost. The bench sat beneath the same willow tree where Lily used to feed ducks with her mother. Sharon visited every week, sometimes with a book, sometimes with a folded letter, sometimes with nothing but silence. She didn't need words anymore. She had already heard the only ones that mattered. My name is Lily Harper. She hadn't told many people about the tape. Maya had brought it to her 2 weeks after the package arrived, and together, in the stillness of Sharon's living room, they listened. Once. Not again. The voice wasn't a match. That's what the state would later declare. The pitch was off, the syntax too mature. Theories ranged from digital manipulation to a cruel hoax. But none of that mattered. Because Sharon knew her daughter's voice, and when that tape played, she didn't need science to tell her what she already felt in her chest. It was her. Somewhere, at some moment in time, Lily had spoken those words. And someone had listened. Maya never closed the investigation fully. She didn't file the final report. She didn't send the tapes to archives. She kept them, quietly, privately, off record. Because what had begun as a criminal case had become something else. A thread too tangled for courtrooms, too strange for case law, a kind of truth that existed just outside the frame of what people were willing to believe. She still got letters, anonymous, scrawled in shaky handwriting, postmarked from towns she'd never been to, always the same shape, a square envelope, no return address. Inside, usually, was a name, a child, a date, sometimes a photo, once a tape. Most didn't lead anywhere, but one did. A girl named Daisy Caldwell, reported missing in 1982, declared dead in absentia in 1990, and in 2002 found alive in Missouri, living under a different name, no memory of where she'd been, just fragments, a truck, a song, the sound of someone whispering, "Don't move, don't talk." Maya had asked her one question. "Do you remember a recorder?" Daisy blinked, then nodded. Orange, with a big red button. It wasn't proof, but it was something. A kind of echo. In the years that followed, Maya built something bigger. A map. Not of bodies, or sites, or suspects, but of voices. Found recordings, anonymous tapes, messages left on outdated answering machines, places where sound had survived even when everything else had vanished. She called it the Playback Project. Most people didn't understand it. It wasn't an official program. It wasn't funded. But every once in a while, someone would show up at her door with a box of belongings and say, "I think this used to be theirs." And Maya would sit, plug in the machine, and listen. Just in case. Because the truth about silence is this. It doesn't mean nothing was said, only that no one was listening when it mattered. Until someone was. Sharon never remarried, never left Dover. She kept Lily's room intact for over a decade. And when she finally moved out of her mother's house, she took only 3 things: the silver locket, the recorder now sealed in glass, and the letter she had written to Lily on her 7th birthday. She never mailed it. There was nowhere to send it. But she kept it folded in her nightstand. It read, "If you are somewhere, if you are scared, if you are trying to speak, I am listening. I will always be listening." She never added to it. She didn't need to, because eventually someone else pressed play, and the sound of a little girl's voice, trapped inside a plastic shell for 9 years, had spoken louder than any scream. It cracked a case. It convicted a man. It uncovered a web. And it reminded the world that even the smallest voice, even the faintest breath, can echo if someone is willing to hear it. So now, when Maya sits in front of a new tape, a new envelope, a new silence, she doesn't rush. She closes her eyes, she waits, she breathes. And then she presses play. Because sometimes the last playback is the first clue.